To order. It's the meeting of the Ojai Groundwater Management Agency on February 30th at January 30th at 3 p.m. Call the roll.
Director Whitman?
Here.
Director Hilke?
Here.
Chair Hilkes?
Here. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, director comments. Peter.
Nothing.
Andy.
Yeah, let's see. Ojai City Council had a well permit come up for approval. And the long and short of that was that the city attorney is going to go look into the history of how we ended up with our own ordinance and the interjection then of the legislation which empowers this body, see if there's overlap and conflict, and recommend to us what we're gonna do about, whether we should continue to exercise that authority or, leave it here in this body.
Good. I don't have any comments. Julia, General Manager comments?
Yes, I have a few things I wanted to mention. DWR, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, they reached out to groundwater sustainability agencies because they wanted to host listening sessions to get feedback from agencies who have previously applied for grants, to find out what kind of obstacles they had, what challenges they had getting grants, what they would need grants for in the future to implement the PMAs from their groundwater sustainability plan. I attended one that was hosted by the Small GSA Coalition that I've mentioned before. And then I had my own session yesterday. It looks like Nancy Ojeda from DWR is on the call. So she was one of the DWR staff who participated in that. I found it really informative. I think that they genuinely want to listen and hear what challenges GSAs have to implement SGMA and their groundwater sustainability plans. A few things that were mentioned is they want to streamline how you apply for funding and remove some of the obstacles. I found out, you guys might be aware of this, that OBGMA had to sort of back out of a grant because it required a 50% match, and we didn't have the funding to meet the match. So that's one thing that they want to avoid in the future, is they want it to be 100% grant or minimal match, and that I think will help when we go to apply for grants in the future. We won't have to come up with so much cash on our own. They also did mention that we mentioned about the compliance part of it. I talked a little bit about the burden of that because SGMA is kind of a one-size-fits-all, but every basin is unique. So that is another thing that they are aware of. They're looking at ways to streamline compliance and reporting to hopefully take the burden off. That's not on the grant side, but on the other DWR staffing side. I found them helpful. Nancy also had sent an email to let us know that they offer facilitation support services with DWR staff. So there's a list of a dozen things that they can help with, including public outreach, stakeholder communication, coordination between basins, things like that. So that's a resource that's available to us if we have the need for it. Let's see, we're going to be working on the state controller's report that's due tomorrow. I'm working with our bookkeeper to get that accomplished. You all completed your, hopefully your Form 700s, they're actually gonna go to an electronic reporting instead. So, Cece's gonna give them your official email that you use on our website for OBGMA business, and you'll be getting an email from the FPCC to set up an account, so you can just upload your information to their website, and that's gonna be due by April 1st. So look for that email to come through. As you know, Prop 4 was passed by the voters back in November, and DWR staff are working on guidelines for how they're gonna distribute that funding. There's a big chunk that hopefully we can tap into. One of the things that, on those listening sessions they mentioned was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the integrated regional water management planning effort the state did, where they kind of broke the state into different sections, and then regions would sort of coordinate their projects that they submitted for funding. It was called IRWIMP, is the acronym for it. I was familiar with that from in my previous life as a consultant, and they were considering doing something similar for GSAs, to break them out by region or something, and then that region decides, you know, they talk amongst themselves to coordinate and cooperate on what projects would get submitted for funding. My suggestion was, instead of doing it regionally, maybe they do it by the size of the agencies, so that small agencies like ours aren't competing with a larger agency, like in the LA basin or something. So they're gonna take that into consideration when they develop the guidelines for that grant funding. Little bitty things, I realized that we don't officially have a list of OBGMA holidays for our staff, so I don't know if that's something that needs board action or not to establish the holidays, or if just as a general manager, that's something I can implement on my own. And I was just gonna follow the Casitas holidays, if that's all right. So if we need to if I need to bring it to the board, I'll bring it to, at the next meeting.
I
know I'm putting you on the spot.
no, that's okay. I mean, I think it's something that certainly could come to the board in an exercise of caution. I don't know that it's something that actually requires board approval. I mean, the board could certainly authorize the general manager to establish an employee calendar. But, you know, the board might want to take a look at it and oversee it and approve it. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
just let me know what you
I
want.
think it'd be easy just to bring it to us.
Okay, I'll bring it to you at the next meeting. Then that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Not basin status report.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Chair Aegis. I appreciate it. And today I wanted to talk about the Ojai Basin conditions for January 2025, and the line "party like it's 1999" is kind of ringing true these days, because that was one of the last times where we had these La Nina watch or La Nina type conditions, where things have been very cold and very dry. I remember 1999 seeing around here a hose that was laid up against a fence, and as it froze overnight, the hose, the water expanded in the hose and went into the fence and created this like frozen spray. And it just struck me as like, you know, you don't see that very often, where there's enough water under some degree of pressure and it kind of expands, and then just you have these icicles on a chain link fence, and in Ojai of all places. So, you know, go figure. But that was 1999, and the conditions were very similar. Not a lot of rain, very cold temperatures, and you know, still enjoying the hangover of 1998, which was so wet. And in this case, it's 2023 and 2024, where we're still enjoying the banking of the water that's happened in the past couple of years. How much rain have we gotten so far? On the ridgetop, we're at about 1.73 inches. It technically is plural. and 1.10 inches on the valley floor. Hopefully, there's more to come, but it's not looking bright. In the Key Well, we've got about 2 years of data here that are showing October 2023 to 2025. And you can see basically the hump of 2024 water year in there. And you can see the nice recession of a curve that we have as the water level has declined. You can see each time this well is pumped, there's a little bit of a dip in the blue line hydrograph at this high resolution frequency. The actual depth to water in the well as of yesterday was 107.33 feet. And based on our Key Well regression curves, we've got about 79% capacity in the basin, or 63,200 acre feet of water. What I did here, which I don't normally do, is put an extra point on this hydrograph, because at the end of the year we still have a low for 2024 that, while that was still declining, we didn't bounce back up like we have in many of the recent years. Usually by December we see a nadir, and we're not there yet. I mentioned 1999 because if you look at a graph like this, that's another place where we don't have a nadir that coincides with a calendar year. And that's an important concept, because you have just a it's happened before where we have a continuing across the new year, maybe some into the midwinter or late winter, or not at all, that we have a nadir. Time will tell. But we're still getting water flowing into the basin. As of yesterday, nothing at Gridley at the confluence. Thatcher had 0.06 of a CFS. Reeves had 0.06 of a CFS flowing in. Surface outflow at Montgomery was about 0.6 of a CFS. Surface outflow at San Antonio Creek proper, 3.57 CFS. The main inflow was at the Ladera Road Bridge at 0.92 CFS. I don't usually go to the hundredths of a CFS, but it's so low that we can actually do that for now. Nothing coming in at McNell. Stewart, same deal. So the total inflow, again, extending to the hundredths of CFS of 1.04, and about 4 times that leaving the basin. But yet water levels continue to decline in the main portion of the basin. This is obviously coming from the shallower system. How does it look in pictures? A little bit of a time travel here. So back to December, it's not a lot of water coming in at that Senior Canyon at Ladera Creek Bridge, at Ladera Road Bridge. And then yesterday looks very similar. Maybe a little bit more water as it's been a little cooler. Thatcher Creek underneath McAndrew, a little bit of a cascade coming in. And then yesterday, a little bit more water coming in at Thatcher, and of course a resident pitching a tent under the bridge. So it's enough to scratch your head a little bit on that one. The confluence in Hermitage between Gridley and Senior Canyon is dry at this cascade, and the point of water that is daylighting there or is finally infiltrating is still a good quarter mile upstream from this point. Down by the daylighting side, this is what we see. There's a bit more of a delay than normal here on the graphic. So there's the photograph we took recently of where groundwater is exfiltrating from the basin just above Soul Park, the south side of town. Where that is on a map, it's interesting. We're at almost the exact same location today as we were on the 4th of December last year, so almost 2 months ago now. And that's interesting because, as again, water levels continue to decline in the main aquifers of the basin, the daylighting point out of the perch system, outlined in the blue, darker blue material in this air photo, is daylighting at the same point it was almost 2 months ago on December 4th. So that's a little bit downstream from where it was on October 23rd, which is the other blue data point of daylighting water along San Antonio Creek here. some more photographs underneath Creek Road where Stewart Canyon drains here. This is about 2 months ago. And then more recently, quite a bit of leaf litter that found its way into the system here. Not enough to wash it out, but push it along into the measurement areas, as shown in this image. So the little bit of rain we had did see some flashing that came to pass and pushed some of that leaf litter right in at the boulders where we put our straps across the culvert there. Down in the point where we measured the main portion of the channel, right at the outflow point, this is what that looks like as of yesterday with that 3.57 CFS coming through. And apologies for the delays in Zoom land out there, but water moves pretty slow sometimes, so this is light speed by comparison. And of course, just the time series of how relatively little change we're seeing at that outflow point. So this is yesterday's photo. Down at the Old Creek Road Bridge over San Antonio Creek, closer to the confluence with the Ventura River, quite a bit of growth and such. The county was actually conducting a rating shift measurements when we visited yesterday on this one. So they're trying to keep up with what actual field conditions are for their automated alert gauges. And down at the confluence, despite such little rain, still quite a bit of water coming in. Most of this, of course, coming in from the Ventura River side, but this is the confluence with San Antonio Creek and the Ventura River. All right, what do we look like going forward? NOAA's predictions during this La Nina time have us right at the equal chances of average for February, April, March 2025. And that's an interesting condition. It's really in that expecting average or 50% equal chances of average, not below average, not above like in the Pacific Northwest, but just in the white. And then continuing on into April, May, and June, which we typically would see less rain anyway, they're again putting us in an equal chances category, despite much of the western United States being in a below average outlook. So this begs the question, how close are we to drought? And I found this pretty interesting graphic prepared by the National Drought Mitigation Center out of the University of Nebraska. And it's pretty sweet because it really shows, gosh, wow, look how dry it is in this short-term composite drought indicator. This would put us in, almost instantaneously from wet conditions to extreme drought in this area, if not, severe, if not extreme drought, with exceptional droughts in some of the inland areas. But this is a short-term composite, and of course a drought is more than just how much rain has fallen or hasn't fallen. It's soil moisture conditions, it's temperature, it's humidity, things of that nature, soil cover, soil moisture, flora, things of that nature that really make the composite. So it's a composite drought indicator for the short term. So if we just look back in, say, the past 3 to 6 months, this is what we're looking at. But of course, conditions are much wetter around here still. So their long-term composite drought indicator is shown here, which looks a lot more real to what we see on the ground as far as conditions in the basin being favorable, surface flows being favorable, things of that nature. But I really like this graphic because it's much more long-term, as groundwater tends to be. It's a place of storage, it's a place of recharge, it's a place of acceptance, it's a place of exfiltration, and it does contribute. So this is much more, I think, representative of what we're seeing. So if we hear about a drought happening right away, or we are in some stage of drought, we still have relatively full basins. We still have relatively full reservoirs. And this long-term drought composite indicator, while experimental, I think is a good indicator of what conditions on the ground are. There's your basin conditions report.
Okay, any questions from the board? Have any questions from the public? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. The next item is public comments. This is on items that do not appear on today's agenda. I have one card. Mr. Cohen? Yes.
Thank you very much. I am David Cohn. I live on North Montgomery Street. My property has a very old well on it, old enough that it was not drilled, it was dug, probably with some guy and a shovel. The inside of this well is paved with river rocks to its stated depth of 31 feet. I've not measured it. And I have no way to understand how I can put a meter on this well. What I've done in my most recent submission to this board was to say, well, at this point, the well is inactive. Until I figure out what we should do or not do about meters, I will not extract any water from it. I generally don't do very much water. My long-term plan had been to use that well to irrigate my wine grapes. However, in the last 2 years, given the rains we have had and the non-dry conditions in which we are living, those vines have survived purely on their own natural groundwater. There's been no irrigation for 2 years. We'll find out if that works for this year. And I just wanted to report that I wish I could put a meter in. I cannot. I don't know what to do. And perhaps at some point someone will help me figure it out.
How do you extract water? You submersible pump?
I use the times I've done it, I've used a sump pump on a long electrical cord. I also have the original pulley on which the bucket was suspended to use this well in its earliest days, well before all of us, including those of us of a certain age, were born.
I have received Mr. Cohn's email with pictures.
Okay.
And I think I responded back that the Meter Compliance Ad Hoc Committee is gonna address it.
And by the way, I'm sorry it got to you late. I managed to misread your email address, and somehow it never bounced back, and so eventually CC gave you the right address.
Okay.
So it was a little late on my part. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda. For the record, Director Daddy is now present.
Apologize for my being tardy. Some claims issues we had.
I'm sure. Okay, the consent agenda is finance report, the minutes of the December 5th meeting. Any questions or comments on those items? If not, I have a motion to approve.
I so move.
Second.
Call the roll.
Director Daddy,
Yes.
Director Whitman,
Abstain.
Director Filkey.
Yes.
Chair Hages.
Yes. Okay, the next item is action items, Groundwater Sustainability Plan 2024 Annual Report. Julia?
Yes, the proposal from Dudek is attached. I believe Devin from Dudek is participating in the meeting. Trevor, unfortunately, moved on to another firm, so Trevor Jones won't be part of the team from Dudek any longer. But he left it in Devin's capable hands, who probably did the bulk of the work, honestly. So the proposal from Dudek is there. The annual report is going to be due by April 1st. And Dudek's proposal includes gathering all the data with Jordan's help and uploading it to the state's portal so that we're in compliance.
Any questions or comments from the board? How close is this to our budget estimates and our?
That's right there in the budget impact part. We budgeted 20,800 for it, so it's a little bit more than what we budgeted for by a couple $1,000s. But the previous one was in the ballpark, 21,500. And we will see a draft of the annual report at the March meeting before it's submitted to DWR.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? So I have a motion to approve.
Make a motion. To approve?
I second.
Call the roll?
Director Daddy,
Yes.
Director Whitman,
Yes.
Director Philke,
Yes.
Chair Hages.
Yes. Discussion items, legislative ad hoc committee. We had anything to report on that? Andy?
No.
The committee did not meet, but I did want to mention, as part of that GSA coalition, there is what would he be called? A lobbyist, I guess, who reports out. And the only couple of things I wanted to mention were that Monique Limon is still the chair of the Natural Resources and Water Committee. And Steve Bennett is still on the Budget Committee. He's also on the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. And they reported that the state actually has a balanced budget this year. They are projecting a surplus in revenue of, I think, $16.5 billion over the next 3 years. So I felt like that was good news. And hopefully, the grant money will come our way.
Chair, I have a question. I guess what I'm assuming what we're trying to do is trying to find out if small little agencies like ourselves can stop spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every few years to submit the same report that says everything's the same. Do we have some type of a deadline we'd like to get a hold? Because this is our actual state senator, and we actually have one of our own assembly people here. We have some friendly legislators. They're not from all over the state. And so should we be stepping up to try to speak to them and just say, look, things are bad enough in this water situation, and the prices, and the farmers are, getting crushed, and just go in and just ask them to support a bill, initiate a bill. It's, kind of late because now we're in the new session, but just kind of like to get something on the table with these guys. So they understand, and they can take a look and see what's possible or probable. Because there's got to be hundreds of small agencies facing the same problem.
Yeah. And Julia's been in contact with the small groups.
Yeah.
You-
And I'm happy to set up a legislative ad hoc committee meeting if you want to discuss it further. We can come up with a strategy.
And we did have a meeting. Our ad hoc had a meeting with, is it Bennett's?
It was with Bennett.
With Bennett's aid?
It's been a while, yeah.
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 But we raised this exact issue with her, and I had a conversation with Bennett that I won't repeat. It wasn't very productive, I'll say that.
Okay. Well, since Monique Limon is the chair of
Yeah.
that committee, maybe that's the more appropriate avenue.
Yeah. I have a meeting with Atticus Reyes tomorrow who's Bennett's aide. And I'll just bring it up with him and see if he has advice through the Bennett channel, but yeah, we should meet with
Okay.
Limon as the ad hoc committee.
Would it be easy enough to identify the other agencies like ours within Lamone's area?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, if we could tell her, hey, you got a dozen of these people and they're doing all the same thing, and here's a list, right? It's more than just representing us.
Yeah, I could do that research. I think the Sigma portal has all that information.
Okay. The next is the meter compliance ad hoc committee. So how are we doing, Julia?
Well, I have numbers. So as you may recall, we sent out some notices to the well owners who we identified did not have meters, according to our database. The first notice went out November 1st, and we sent 43 notices out. Followed up with the second notice, December 6th, that went to 36 people. We actually had some people contact us and provide us information in that time. The final notice went out January 10th to 35 well owners. They had a 90-day deadline that expired yesterday, January 30th. There's still 35 or so out there that don't have meters. That we've heard from 10 like Mr. Cohen, who have unique situations. And the committee did meet on January 13th to talk about, with Peter as well, to talk about a possible path for exceptions or exemptions to the metering requirement. So Peter's looking at some examples from other agencies to put something together to present to the whole board. The next step is to, since the deadline passed yesterday, putting those 10 or so aside who've contacted us, and the rest that are left who we've had no communication with. My goal over the next week or so was to go through that list with Cece and just back check everything. The next step is to provide a 30-day notice of a board hearing. And that board hearing would be at which the board decides to impose fees and penalties for not having a meter. My initial thought was I send those notices out by February 10th and then hold a special board meeting March 13th. Rather than doing it at a board meeting, I thought a special board meeting would be able to just focus on those meter, non-compliance owners and bring, 5 to 10 well owners, give them the notice, let them come and make their case, and let the board decide what they want to do. So I have it penciled in as March 13th, probably at 5 p.m. to give people the opportunity to come after work. That's kind of where everything stands. And I'm calling that Group A. As we were going through this and people started calling saying, oh, but I have a meter. We're like, well, you're not reporting it. Cece and Tara did basically an audit of all the files in the office. Every well owner looked at all their information and made sure that what we had on paper matched what was in the database. When they went through that process, 14 more well owners popped up who don't have meters. The database said they did, but their paperwork did not support that. So I sent out, I'm calling them Group B, another batch of first notices to those 14 owners. That went out January 10th, and their 90-day deadline is April 30th. So they'll go through that process where they get a second notice and a third notice also. So there's two parallel groups kind of happening. One's further ahead than the other one. That's where that stands right now.
Well, Jim, Director Finch and I were in that meeting with Peter and Julia. I thought we were going to select some of the worst
Yeah, that's that.
first, so we don't want to have a hearing with 35 people
Right,
showing
it'll
up.
be like 5 to 10 well owners who probably how I'll filter it is they don't have a meter and they haven't been providing their quarterly reports either. We just need to get their attention.
And how are we what are we doing for proof of service? When they show up and say, geez, we never heard from you, what are we? How are we gonna do
We sent the first notice out regular mail. We have sent the second and final notices out certified mail to the addresses that we have on file. I think we've only gotten one green card back that they did not pick up
With regard to proof of service for the
for the hearing.
that? Yes.
Our enabling legislation requires that be by registered mail. So the notices will go out by registered mail.
And the hearing will be to determine what?
Penalties.
Well, at the board's discretion to assess a penalty.
Okay.
These folks have been advised that they're out of compliance. I need to speak with Julie about possibly following up with a letter this coming week, telling them that, the time limit you were given has elapsed. You're now out of compliance, and the board will be holding a hearing, and you'll be hearing from us. And we'll provide further notice of when penalties will be assessed. So I think that'll be the next step, and then we'll get the hearing notices out, and we'll want to make sure that, you know, it's the appropriate number of folks, so it's not incredibly burdensome in terms of a hearing, but I expect it'll be a lively hearing, right? I think maybe people will finally show up and deal with the situation. Although, I gotta say, it's a little bit late. But again, that'll be up to the discretion of the board based on what the various folks that come forward and, you know, have to say about their situation.
And are we gonna advise them what the possible penalties are ahead of time, so that will give them a little incentive to show up, so they understand what they're facing?
So we have advised them, each of the 3 letters that went out, advised them of the penalty authority that the board has. And then the letter that Julie and I will work on to go out advising them that they are now delinquent will also advise them of the penalty authority the board has. And so, yes, they should be well aware and, you know, have at any point in time been free to contact the agency and ask any questions they have or follow up. But we haven't heard from them.
I just want to avoid somebody coming and going, I never heard, I didn't know, I wasn't aware. You know, we're gonna have that anyhow.
We're making sure we dot our i's and cross our t's.
So there is one, you know, circumstance I'm aware of where I've been contacted by somebody in Ojai. They pointed out the water code provision that says that if you're pumping less than 2 acre feet, that you're exempt. Peter helped me out with the response to that, and I let them know that there's different legislation that controls your well, not the water code, but our enabling legislation. So, you know, it's possible that we're gonna see people coming in, relying upon that, and, you know, I don't have an opinion about how you address that. But it might be worthwhile putting it in your notices to clarify that they're under the OBGMA enabling legislation and not the generalized water code.
What's the saying, a mistake of law is no defense?
Yeah, right, yeah.
But my sense is that if people show up and have a reasonable explanation, you know, the board's gonna listen to that. The objective here, I think, as the board has indicated, is to get them to show up and respond.
Yeah.
And you know, it's those folks that don't that, you know, will get a penalty imposed, whatever it may be, in the board's discretion, and then, you know, it'll be a matter of collecting that. So.
Yeah, and if we're gonna get in a legal battle, those penalties are gonna be imposed to collect our costs.
Something to consider, certainly.
On
Do you
that
think,
high note,
yeah, you think it's, first of all, we have to adopt penalties for board members that don't show up at those hearings.
of that hearing?
At our next regular board meeting, is it possible for us to discuss in an open meeting what the protocol will be and how we'll impose these fines? I don't want us to get into an argument and,
Should we have a meter compliance ad hoc committee meeting before then to talk about it?
yeah, we could, but it's, I don't know if we could establish some kind of criteria for how we're going to evaluate these. I mean, I think we all agree that compliance is what we want, so if they comply and they do it within some given time, then we're good. But if they don't, I mean, you know, we're gonna go to war, so we have to be prepared for that.
Right, I mean, I could see the board taking action to impose a penalty. Let's say they don't show up at all, penalties imposed, then the next level would be enforcement. And, you know, at that point, it's probably when we'll hear from them. And, anyway, it sounds like at the next meeting, or if we have a special meeting, you know, I'll come prepared and we can talk about that a little bit further.
All right. Yeah, I just want to be able to have a good idea of what our choices are going to be. I mean, if someone comes in and says, well, you know, I'm sorry, and I'll comply, just tell me what I have to do, that one's pretty easy. But if you get someone that wants to come in and argue with us about our authority to do this and wants to extend the battle, that's a whole different thing. So, and you have to be prepared to explain to them what we're going to do and how we're going to collect that money. Because the next step is we didn't go to court, I assume.
I was going to move forward with putting it on their property tax bill.
Yeah, But-
That's kind of what the timeline that I was looking at, to make sure that we get these taken care of before we have to submit that to the county to be on the tax assessors.
yeah. But can we do that without going to court first?
I think the board just has to take action.
I think so.
Okay,
I think you reported on that a few sessions ago, didn't you?
Yeah.
That it was
We-
not, we did not need to litigate, we had the
Right.
authority to do it through the tax program.
Right, previously, I think a couple board meetings ago, maybe a question came up, you know, do we have the authority to lien a property? And in order for OBGMA to lien a property, we'd have to go to the court, get a judgment. But an alternative procedure is through the tax rolls.
Okay.
If we assess the penalty and then advise the county assessor that, you know, it's been assessed and properly so, then it goes on the tax rolls and it's up to them to collect. So it seems like that's a more expedient way to do it.
yeah, okay. Any questions? All right. We're going to adjourn into closed session.
Sure, the board's gonna meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subdivision D2, to discuss recent developments in the Ventura River adjudication.
And I'm gonna have some questions at the beginning, just to clarify that I can participate, because I do represent a couple of parties in the water adjudication. But based upon a preliminary conversation with Mr. Candy, it doesn't sound like anything that we're gonna discuss is really gonna impact my role there. But I'll ask a couple of questions and determine whether I can stay or not.
That would be appropriate, I think.
Yeah.
So we can't adjourn the meeting, right, because we'll need to go in a closed session, then come back. Ye- Okay, so,
Stop the feed, the video feed now. Well, we're gonna do it here. No, we're gonna go into the other room, but people on the Zoom and all that, you're gonna lose your Zoom access in a minute here.
right, we're adjourned to closed session.